Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I don't need a microphone. That's good. A warm welcome to this fireside chat tonight with Folke. And this is organized today by the Swedish Chamber and the Finnish Chamber together. And as you know, tonight is Halloween night, right? But we are not here to hear scary stories tonight.
Well, a little
we
bit.
are rather here to get influenced by Folke.
Yes.
Yes. And to facilitate the discussion tonight, I'm happy to introduce Johan Persson. And I'm sure you all have met Johan, but I'll just say a few words. And Johan has been here for quite a long time now. It's almost 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he is the founder of Simon Studios, one of the top named innovation agencies here in Hong Kong, actually. And apart from that, you are frequently invited speaker, writer, and lecturer on design and innovation.
Yes.
When you're not here.
Yes.
Yes. And we are so happy to hear, and I'm sure that you are eager to introduce and start the discussion. So welcome.
Yes. Thank you very much. I still think I'm going to use this to save my voice. As you see, we're color coordinated tonight, so we don't have to think about that. I think we're going to sit down, if that's okay with you, to have a little bit of a more relaxed conversation together. Since we're talking about a very specific part in the marketing chain, I thought I'd just talk a little bit and give you a little bit of an introduction. I'm not sure that every one of you here viewing this is a CMO, so I'm going to break it down a little bit to give you a step in to how we're viewing this. So we have, through a very long time, used a traditional marketing funnel. So we have started with awareness to create awareness for our brands and what we're selling. We're creating familiarization about that, and then that leads to a consideration phase, hopefully leading into a purchase. And if that's good and we like it, that leads to a loyal consumer. However, what's happening now, and especially in the digital age, is that this funnel is totally being broken up. So we see that it's absolutely not at all just awareness that leads to the next step in familiarization. So awareness alone is absolutely not enough. We see that 58% of is switching actually from the old funnel, and when we go to the next step in familiarization, the brand set that we're considering in that phase is actually expanding. And 58 of those brands are then leaving the funnel. And when it comes to loyalty, actually in 30 categories measured, only 13% led to a loyal consumer. So this is broken. So to replace this, we are rather looking at the loop, the customer journey loop, where we start with an initial consideration set. So that means that a lot of those strong customer buys for an initial brand set are based on perception and reputation about that brand. And we kind of have those sets of brands in all these different categories before we start purchasing. And in the active evaluation set, we see that actually that set of brands actually expand. And coming to an ultimate customer decision, we select one brand, and that's the moment of purchase. And in the post-exposure, obviously there's a lot of expectations and a bias in terms of the decision purchase in the next cycle. So we have that cycle that those that are loyal take the shorter loop, and then we have active buyers in the second loop. And even when we're looking now towards a consumer-driven marketing, meaning that in that process, we're actually, as a consumer, actively collecting in more information from the internet. We're doing this by friends. We're doing this by reviews, reading reviews about the product. We're doing that by looking through ads. We're talking to friends and family, looking at what celebrities are wearing, and also looking at ratings if we go to a hotel, for example. So those are sets that we actively, as consumers, pull in to make an informed decision in our purchasing decision. And also, then when we're using this, is it easy to use? Does it have the quality that I'm looking for? Is it easy to repair? Does it give me the benefits that I want? Customer service, end of life, how easy is that? Does that lead to a loyalty loop, or do I continue to shop? So the thing here that we see is that still in that set is that 2/3 of the brands that we already have in the initial consideration set are the ones that we initially then end buying. So that's a pretty closed loop. We're not really letting that many new brands into this. So the trick here, and what we're trying to focus on, are actually 2 points. Because we need to trigger the consumer into this cycle. We can use innovations, or we can use influencer marketing like Folke is using to trigger a consumer to enter this loop. And the second one is that we are really looking hard for the customer experience to be good, so we can then enter the loyalty loop into this. So when we're talking here with Folke, we're going to talk about influencers, which is one of the really strong tools to trigger a consumer into this loop. So, welcome, Folke.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
So, should we start with this really simple question? What's a micro-influencer?
I think you should have a...
Sure. Or we can share. We can share. Doesn't matter.
Okay. I think we have to.
Now, first of all, before jumping into the question about micro-influencers and influencers in general, I want to say that you captured the challenges that we are seeing on a daily basis very well here. We are now trying to walk away from this old, what we call almost a myth, that awareness, in some miraculous way, leads to direct sales. For us, what we always say now is perception is everything. I just had a 2.5-hour talk with a client with a 30-year-old history, leader in his industry, and he doesn't figure it out what's going on. The awareness is total, but his marketing investments is completely still pouring into the awareness phase instead of changing that perception, entering that set of brands that you mentioned here, where you have to be part of those brands that you actually consider buying. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything if you're just a brand that people are aware of. I think most of us can name drop 100 different brands in each category. But if you don't qualify up to the ones that are on top of your mind when you're actually starting to begin that purchasing process, it means nothing really. So yeah, a great way to illustrate it. I haven't seen this model before, but I will definitely take it for my next talk. And to jump into your question, I mean, what we do with influencers, we sort of break the word influencers and influencer marketing down in 3 different layers. And the first one at the top of this pyramid is the one that we normally can relate to, which we call like the mega influencers. Those could mostly be referred as the ones that we say are the celebrities. And they are well known for the general public. They're using social media today as a way to communicate with their fans, but they haven't been born and raised through this digital landscape. And in the middle phase, we have the sort of like the micro-KOLs. Those are the ones that the major population might know about these people, but maybe not know them. So some could be like traditional celebrities, but some could be like digital or influencers being bred out or sort of fed up from this digital landscape. And then we have the segment that we are working with, which is sort of like the micro-influencers, which 99% of the normal population wouldn't have a clue about who they are. However, these micro-influencers have, under the radar, been able to, attract circles of fans within their demographic groups, which are very loyal to them specifically, which make them such a fantastic tool to use for whatever reason it is when it comes to marketing. And that's why we also use them, again, like what we said from the beginning, as a way to, change that way of perception.
Great. So when you're saying that you're doing this, I assume that you then have to measure this quite rigorously, because we know that we're not, one of the things that we know, the companies that are doing market analytics, we can totally see that that's really homing in on the consumer that we are really want to reach in this. And many of those studies show that we can save up to 15 to 20% of our marketing budget just by knowing actually how and who and why and whom we're targeting. So in terms of micro-influencers then, how is that enabling us to be more direct and targeted in our marketing effort?
Well, there are a lot of questions in that question, but the big difference between how we do things and how things are traditionally being done, previously it has been a lot about a top-to-bottom approach. Big companies, they invest a lot of money to have brand guidelines, etc., and then they try to shove that brand DNA down in all of their channels. As for when we work with micro-influencers, we're working with a bottom-to-top approach. So here we put the influencer in the center, and he has to do his own interpretation of that specific brand. So when we start working with any kind of brand, we sort of start by listening to the market. Instead of listening to the brand dictating to us what type of categories, what type of demographic groups should buy his product, we say, let's hold on, let's listen to the market, let's listen to see what these influencers have to say about your product. So, because at the end of the day, I think they want to see results, tangible results. So obviously, when we start doing this, the measuring part becomes very powerful or essential in this process when we do measure every category for each specific purpose. Because also one of the things that is important to mention is like people sort of have difficulties placing influencers in the value-added change. Like for what reason, for what specific purpose should I use influencer? Is it a sales tool? Is it a branding tool? Is it a, I don't know, coupon tool? For what should I use it?
Now you're talking about the marketing organization.
Yeah,
inside the marketing section.
Exactly.
Am I a content? Should I talk with the content director? Should I talk with the ad director? Should I talk with who? Like, that's what you mean. So it's hard for you to place yourself within that organization.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's our approach is, like, again, putting the consumer in the front row and listening to him more than just, like I said, pushing down the brand guidelines through our throats.
Yeah. So it's not enough by just having a good-looking brand, coherent in all its sake in branding. It's also better that the actual influencer is using that and talking about in a real, natural, human way to persuade the consumer to use that product.
Yeah, we're capitalizing on their mini fame in their circles. We want them to be authentic. We want their followers to think or believe that he's actually loving this beer that he's drinking now. This is the whole idea. So we're capitalizing on his fame. And as the more we move towards being a traditional ad in a new space, the more power we lose in that perception process, in the conversion process, in all different steps.
So here's a question. I think most audience, most consumers are then used to seeing celebrities endorsing different products. Don't you think that the consumer will see through that endorsement then? Or do you think that micro-influence have a stronger benefit to persuade that consumer to follow into the loop?
I mean, this is not an attitude or something that I think. We measure these things. We know for a fact now that micro-influencers are like 10 times more persuasive into pushing somebody towards that perception and towards a conversion. What celebrities do is that they create awareness. So they have a function still in the new way of market. But again, they only put the first platform of awareness, but they will not push you towards because the distance between me and George Clooney talking about Nespresso is pretty wide. I don't connect to George, even though he says he loves Nespresso. I will still have difficulties connecting to what George is saying. However, if my best friend is saying that he likes Nespresso, I will listen. So this gap and the closeness is an important part of understanding micro-influencers and why they're so potent.
So can you go in more in terms of telling me like how you measure this? How can I get direct data and see that, for example, if we're not really concerned, we are always concerned about awareness, but we're trying to lift up the reputation of our brand. How does influencer do that, and how do we measure that?
Yeah, it comes back again to how do you allocate your influencers for what specific purpose. I mean, many people tend to think or see it as a sales tool, see us as an extended sales organization, an affiliate, or something similar. So sometimes, even though we are a very strong tool that can be used towards conversions, we are foremost a marketing company. However, yes, we do end up in having very sales-driven campaigns, and of course, then we measure each and every single influencer depending on his own category, connected to what category of product or brand he's working with, and then we measure traffic, we're measuring conversions and ROI, these classical things. So I think this is one of the most important things. The other purpose, which is the real purpose, again, coming back to changing perceptions. How do we measure changing a perception? How do I measure that my brand is becoming more popular again? How do we measure that my brand is it's again on the top of people's head? And of course, then we're using other types of tools to sort of measure that trend shift that we want to see. So we use a thing that we call social listening, and also dig deep into these kind of discussion to see what are people saying about my brand now? Are people searching my brand more frequently using the search engines, etc., etc. So we can sort of determine if we're moving in the right way.
Can you see that certain industries are responding better for micro-influencers, or is it how can we kind of be more sure about that?
We work with a broad range of industries, and I think regardless regardless of what industry you're in, again, coming back to what we are, we're just a tool. So if a TV can be used in many different ways, I don't go blame the TV. If my commercial didn't go well, I would probably blame the guy, the art director, or the content curator coming up with that specific campaign. The same goes for influencers. I hear a lot of people saying influencer doesn't work for me, not my kind of industry. And then I say, okay, what did you do before? And let's talk about what you have done, and let's see what we can do. A lot of things that we put into this now is just, again, understanding each and every company. What are they challenging? Where are they in the purchasing process, in the consideration process, the awareness process? So we have to do a big work before we even start any campaign. But for our knowledge, we don't see any particular industry that is reacting better or worse. It's just about how you apply the tool, I would say.
So do you see, we've been talking about awareness, we're talking about reputation. So do you see any one of those tools that micro-influencers is particularly good in handling?
we have a case. I mean, we did a specific case with Spotify more than 2 years ago, and it was kind of interesting. Again, so they placed us with a premium team, and the premium team, they only care about downloads. And that's the exact position we don't want to be in. We want to be in the marketing position where we can, change the attitudes. But we end up with the premium team, so we sort of end up with a CPA, a cost per acquisition, and then they know exactly how much they can pay for an acquisition. So we did this trial, and yeah, we were able to match their CPA. And after this trial, the marketing department woke up and said, hey, we're seeing something abnormal happening in some markets. So the marketing department asked the premium department, said, what's going on? Are you guys doing something that we don't know about? And they were like, yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah, we're doing a pilot thing with this company down in Shenzhen. Okay, interesting. So they were sort of could see that even though we're focusing on a premium campaign, only focused on acquisitions, we still drive awareness. But to your point or to your question, and what they needed to know, and that's why we sort of have a lot of data supporting what we're saying, we drove awareness. But it's, again, awareness doesn't mean that it's good awareness. It could be bad awareness, because we see a lot of alternatives out there, like retargeting, a lot of ads that don't lead to positive awareness. So they asked us, okay, obviously, guys, what you do also leads to awareness, but can you prove that this doesn't lead to negative awareness? Could you see some kind of a negative spillover effects before we push the big go button? And we couldn't answer this question. So then we had to turn to a third party in Sweden to really dig deep into these questions, so we really could answer their questions. And after 3 months later, we could really see that, or we could proudly present and say, you know what, the more you get exposed through micro-influencers, creates not deterring marketing effect, marginal effect, or contraire. The possibility of he converting in the future goes up, the loyalty goes up, and the willingness to pay a premium for the product also goes up. So all of those three critical things in marketing, we could then support with this market survey. So after this, obviously, they had all the questions, or the answers responded. So from there on, we could sort of scale it up.
So you basically cover awareness, reputation, and say those are the three arrows or three legs you can push when you come to that. Should I be more specific? So when somebody is coming to you and asking for the specific, how specific can you be in terms of your request?
I mean, we want to move away from the direct sales channel. We are very, very effective in terms of changing perceptions, pushing you up that ladder, making, again, like you were talking about, starting people to consider your brand in a very effective way. Yes, that will convert to sales eventually, but in order for me to start discussing sales, I need to start owning your sales channels. And I don't want to own your sales channels, and probably you want to do this yourself. However, I can control the path all the way up to traffic. And these are the things that we measure. Obviously, we have figures from all the way to the conversion and the ROI. So it sort of becomes like a mathematical formula for us. If we have to do these campaigns, then it just becomes a matter of statistics for us.
Okay, so basically any industry you can work with, and you can do spot on targeting with number one, awareness, number two, reputation. So there must be a limit to what it is you're working with here. So what's the limitation, the set of limitation that maybe I shouldn't approach through a micro influencer?
I think in this day of time, I think regardless, I also normally say that, I mean, people use the questions, should I have a homepage or not? And now nobody's sitting discussing if I should have a homepage or not. It's just a fact, you need to have a homepage. So 5 years ago, people discussed, when I sat down, when I started Viral Access, I had to sit down with people and talk to them and ask, like, emphasize the importance of investing digital. And people were like, no, digital is not for us. So, end of discussion. But now people understand they need to invest digital also. Now it has moved further. Now people sort of understand they need to have a presence in social media. And with that fact, you need to have an influencer marketing strategy also. Otherwise, you will not use your social media accounts in a good way. So then you're just wasting money, like people did before with the homepage. They said they have a homepage, but then they didn't do anything with it. So obviously it didn't work for them. So I think, according to, or in terms of limitations, I don't see a limitation. Au contraire, I think every industry must realize that there is no way around this. You need to consider a social media strategy and an influencer marketing strategy. Yeah, go ahead.
I have such a short and bad memory, so if I have a question, then I ask it now, or would you like to?
So I didn't go through the house rules. It's perfectly okay. I thought that I'd give you a little background. I think we can talk more about how Folke is working, and then we can end with a 15 minutes Q&A. Is that okay? Okay, I'm sure you all have a bunch of questions. So I'm just trying to open up the floor so we can ask really good questions about this. So, Folke, when you're going through these, you said earlier that it's hard for you to, in some way, identify yourself within the marketing organization. So who do you think should own the marketing? Now, if you're saying that every organization should, that's one of your tools that are very strong, and everyone should start using micro-influencers as an influencer. So who should own that question?
How do you mean, who should own it? I mean,
So within the marketing organization, you said that it was hard for you to fit
I see
into
what you
this.
mean.
So who do you think, like with that experience, that it should own that questions of marketing influencers?
yeah, then I would say it should be the marketing department. And again, like I said, we increase conversions. Yes, we do create traffic, and yes, we do create ROI. But our specialty is about perceptions. Again, making your brand qualify up to those brands that are being considered. So that's what we do. And we do this in a very effective way. And that's why, even though we're ending up with sometimes CPA campaigns, we are able, in a very short period of time, because everybody knows changing an opinion, starting a trend takes time. But with our tool, we are able to do this with very short period of time. We're not talking 1 month, but we're talking 6 months, 3 months. We can start seeing like very tangible results. But still, if I say something, it has to be the marketing department.
Do you think eventually, is there any chance that we will see some drawbacks from this? Some that consumers will see through these patterns, and we're feeling, you can see, for example, these, a lot of Amazon, when they said that, okay, you have been doing this, so this should be nice for you, but a lot of people have pushed back and say, I don't want, this website looking at every step I do because I feel controlled. So that's something that's like gone down a little bit of use. Do you think that we can see that consumers then will kind of spot that this is too much, this is selling to me? Or is it just that we will replace that with a micro-influence that does it better, maybe?
I think the micro-influencers especially are their own QC filter. So they know specifically exactly what content they can post and what content they cannot post. And they're following their followers and their engagement like on a daily basis, on an hourly basis almost. So they know exactly how they should behave in order to become more popular in their circles. However, I do think that, that what's happening in Europe, now you have to say like, oh, this post is promoted by, or this is a paid promotion or something like this. We are not having these restrictions in Asia, so we don't have that problem yet. Probably we will have this in the future as well. However, I think what will happen is that the micro-influencers will become more and more niched. And this is another trend that we're seeing, that before being micro was just sort of like a starting point to become big. Like that was the end game. Now we're seeing more and more niches within one category, and the end purpose for them, they don't want to be mainstream. They just want to eat noodles. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. They just want to have recognition from their circle. They don't care about recognition from somebody from a boring, I don't know, industry guy. They only want recognition for that specific circle. So we're seeing a big trend towards just being more narrow in your category.
Can we see like a result from the long tail then, that the e-commerce is growing, and then we have can have a bigger sortiment to choose from?
I think
And
definitely,
that means
yeah.
that we can be more niche and more
Definitely.
specific.
Definitely. I think when it comes to food, we will see different types of foodies, like 5 different or 10 different categories for photos or food or whatever it is, travel. It will not only be photo, it will be different kind of photos. Unpackaging, I only unpackage tech product, I don't unpackage clothes. What do you think? That it's completely different skills. So this is what we will see definitely. So our way to target our specific demographic group will definitely increase.
So this is the job that will replace everybody that loses their job from AI, basically. Everyone will be a micro-influencer.
I think the end game will sort of be like this, and this is the trend that we're seeing also with the merger between social and e-commerce, that sort of everybody will be able to have a tool that sort of capitalize on your own small circles, regardless if you have 500 Facebook followers or if you have 5,000 followers, you can sort of have a tool to where you can sell your old shoes or sell your old Daniel Wellington watch or whatever it is.
So you basically start owning your own data.
Correct.
Every user, everyone in our society will have a better control to what they're doing with their own data, and if you choose to sell it, you can then sell it to and become a micro-influencers in that way.
That's what we sort of think will happen, because today the people don't rely anyway about the social platforms. I mean, it's the way that we're seeing with BMW and Mercedes. Nobody thinks that they will actually fix the problem with pollution. They were just finding a way to walk around the actual problem. They're not fixing the real problem. Same for Facebook. Nobody really believes that they're not going to sell our data or use the data for other stuff. So what's going to happen is that we're going to take control of my own data and capitalize on my own data, because I know Facebook will sell it regardless, whatever he says. It's just finding ways around that. Now we have this new law, GDPRS or whatever it's called in Europe. But again, we do this because we don't trust these sources. So definitely we will take control over our own data, yeah.
So what restrictions, if you're talking about that, what restrictions do we see coming into micro-influencers?
I think the same things that we're seeing in Europe, in the US, I think we will see here as well, that people will sort of be forced to mention that it's a paid advertisement. The things that we're seeing here in Asia, though, the market is way more fragmented. I mean, in Sweden or in Europe or in the States, it's still like 2-3 different social platforms that sort of dominate the whole industry. We work on a daily basis with 20 different platforms, only 5 with short videos and live streaming that are completely like unheard of in the West. So it's a little bit, it's way different.
Excellent. So at this point, I think I'm going to open up the floor to questions. So anyone that you had a question back in the...
Yeah, we were talking about the micro-influencers. So China and the Western world, is there a big difference on the influencers, how they behave, and is there something that we should take into account? We all are basically Western educated and so on, so what's the difference between them?
I don't know really where to start if you're talking about styles or categories, but they're different from the beginning to the end. And if I start with, how they behave towards the brands and what categories we have, I think, there's big differences. I think first of all, we don't even talk really that much about micro-influencers in the West. We still talk about, influencers in general. So I think we have come a bit further maybe here in Asia compared to the West. But the biggest difference, I don't know really, since we don't really have we don't have anything to measure or compare with. But the biggest difference, obviously, is that there haven't been that the market haven't been that market adjusted here, if I can use that description, meaning you get more for your money here compared to the West, as it has become more market adjusted. So that would, I would say, would be the biggest difference.
Which social media tools is the channels out from you in China?
I mean, obviously, I think all of you guys, you have heard like Douyin now is sort of like killing it now in China, and we sort of have to implement Douyin account for all of our clients and produce content on Douyin. And for you guys that don't know it, it's like a short video app. It's called TikTok in the West. So this is a very important tool for us. But we're seeing like short videos and live streaming, I would say would be, for 2019, would be almost 40% of our content, 40% of the influencers that we're seeing would be in this segment alone. And again, coming back to your question, I don't think we even have that category back in Europe doing this kind of content.
So how in recent times in Europe you've been seeing more premium content being created by these influencers? They're traveling places, they have huge camera sets, they have, I mean, they produce really good content. Do you see the same in China or in Asia?
Yeah, definitely, and we're seeing that it's getting more and more advanced also, and that's why we also we are really, again, asking the client what it is that he wants. Now, for some campaigns, we're only focusing on producing like visual content. So for those campaigns, we don't connect any like of the traditional engagement, impressions, ROI, traffic. We only focus on the actual content, because now content is king. It was true 10 years ago. It's more true now than ever. You need to feed your social media accounts with new content every day. And who better to produce that content for you than influencers and micro-influencers? So that's why, yeah, definitely we're seeing more like, better quality or high quality production by these influencers, because obviously more money is poured into this industry now also. So we have the freedom also to do better content.
Yeah, I have a question. I think, or I assume that a lot of your customers are in the consumer segment or like B2C, like, Daniel Wellington and similar. So if you're working for, let's say, Scania or SKF or ABB, how common is that you work with them? And if so, what channels do you tap into? And how well does it work if you sell, industrial machinery?
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's different. Obviously, it wouldn't be the same influencer that we would use for selling a Daniel Wellington watch. And again, it wouldn't be the same approach. For Daniel Wellington, it was more aggressive B2C approach. But in the case of Scania and those industrial companies, again, for you, it's critical, changing or at least polishing that perception of that brand, make it relevant, and find the space for you with the right social media platforms and with the right influencers. So, yeah, we're working with car brands today, helping them launch their new car models, helping them do other activities to, emphasize and strengthen their perception in the market.
I read a study about that, actually, about that before you purchase in the US, almost 70% of all consumers are listening to some kind of feedback to that specific product before they actually make the purchase. So obviously that considers all industries, and if you're buying a consumer electronics, or you're buying a watch, or you're buying a car, or whatever, you go to those specific people that are talking and are reviewing those specific products before you make that purchase.
So how many influencers are you working with today?
We're working with around 3,000 to 4,000 on a monthly basis, and we have around 120,000 in our network.
So how do you acquire new influencers, and how do you vet them?
That's a good question. We work completely organically. So we have grown with we grow with our clients. But when we select influencers, for me it's like a portfolio management. If you go to a bank and you tell them like, oh, here I have 100,000 euro, can you please invest them in the best possible way? So this is sort of what we do. Instead of that portfolio with money, we put different influencers in that portfolio for different specific purposes. So when we do a campaign for a new brand, for instance, probably I would go the safeguard. Maybe I use 100% of the influencers that I use for you for the first 3 months I have worked with before. I know what to expect. I rely on the data that I have. But obviously, since we move forward, we communicate with the client, and we sort of have to mix this portfolio up. Maybe put some high-risk stocks in there to see how they turn out. Maybe we try this new platform, try a new influencer here. I cannot guarantee that it would be great, but I would suggest that we try some of these new wild stuff. But again, weigh the portfolio. So the long-term goal is always, keeping your perception in a good way and build that brand awareness in a sustainable way.
Can you select like different, so when you're going in the sales curve and you're hitting a pioneer, you're going to early adapters, early majority, and so on, is it also so specific so you can actually target and, there must be certain influencers that are more triggered for an early adapter that are talking more about to those than it is. Is that also a possibility you can select from?
It could be. We are not that sophisticated yet in the data that we collect. However, we would be able to get that kind of data if the client would sort of require us to dig deep into that data. Then we could sort of narrow down to see what age is the actual influencer, what city does he live in, what previous campaigns has he been doing, to sort of draw the conclusion. So I think we are able to do that. Not too many clients are that specific yet, though. But I mean, with all new clients comes a new challenge for us, and sort of forces us to also develop and continue to develop our product.
Okay, my question was my question was, as a startup, you have a big database, but as a startup, how do you identify a micro influencer, and how do I find them?
Yeah, that's our what we always say. I mean, if it was easy to find and if it was easy to vet them, then everybody would do this. And that's the big part. This is the problematic part, and that's why people sort of fall back on the influencer selection, because that is sort of a normal marketing director. He can sort of handle or find 5 sort of semi-famous ones and sort of know he feels comfortable with working with these 5 big KOLs for one specific task. However, going into the micro segment, we talk about a scalable model. Like I said, we work with thousands and thousands. I mean, the minimum we work with is around like 300-400 a month for each brand. So we're not talking about using 5 or 10 a month for a brand. And then it becomes problematic. And this is sort of our unique selling point, that you don't have to do that. Go and sort of lift every stone to see if it works out or not. We have already done that process for you. We have worked with thousands of thousands not working out, and we have worked with thousands that have worked out.
Thank you, Folke and Johan. Great to have you here. Looking at, I have so many questions. I could sit down with you a whole day, I can imagine, but I'll keep it to one question only. So, looking at China, about influencer marketing, is this a trend across all China we're talking about, or could you kind of say that this is in certain provinces or in certain metropolitan areas, or what is the behavior?
The trend with micro-influencers? No, actually it's not. I would say like 3-4 years ago, 1/3 of like the blog posts were done in Japan, which is one of our biggest markets also. So actually they're way before us in terms of micro-blogging as well. So it's not a China thing, even though we have a lot of them in China also. So, and again, we cover all of the markets besides Iran and India now. So we're seeing the same trend regardless if it's Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, or China. They are basically everywhere.
Yes, so a question a little bit about financials. So how do I, as a customer, how would I pay you? Is it per project or result? And also, what do you pay the influencers?
Since obviously this trend or this tool is a pretty new tool. Like 3 years ago, there was not even one search on Google for micro-influencer. So, or influencers like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, the word didn't exist. So obviously this is a new thing. So this has resulted, obviously, that the marketing departments, and regardless what company you're in, they haven't really adapted to this new trend. They're sitting with one more digital guy at the most, and if I want to talk to a social media guy, in 90% of the cases, I won't find that person at that company. And again, regardless the size. So this means that the clients and we sort of tend out to seek a long-term strategic partnership. So we sit down now with all of our clients basically on a yearly basis and openly discuss your normal marketing calendar, and we fill out that space where we call digital, social media, and influencer marketing for you, coming up with everything from the creatives, how to strategically spend that money in the different digital channels, to execution, analytical, and follow-up. So that's sort of how we work. So we don't come in and just like, oh, let's launch that beer 2 weeks in a party and then we're out. This is not how we work.
So it's the whole digital strategy.
Correct.
Thank you, Folke. If you think of like a 2x2 with services on one side and products on the other side, and then you think about sort of products and services and high value and low value. So like a low value product, maybe just a tie, for instance. A high value is a car, and on the services side, maybe a Spotify is a sort of low service, and high value could be something like, you know, big cruise tour.
Yeah.
Because you said it was working in all categories,
Yeah.
right? But if you think about that sort of 2x2 matrix, where do you see some limitations and opportunities?
Coming back to China again, we have seen people selling helicopters, Maseratis, Minis, Daniel Wellington watches. You know, again, that's why I'm sort of pretty confident that it doesn't really matter if you're selling a car, if it's a Maserati, a luxury car, if it's a helicopter, or if it's a mini car. We have proven that influencers can have been a very strong tool to push that through the purchasing funnel also. So I think it's just how creative are you using this tool, because the possibilities are endless. This is, I think, something that you should just bring back to you. It's not, the tool itself is not limited. It's how we apply it and how we regard the tool that is sort of limiting us. So please bear in hand that you can use it for whatever, regardless if that luxury product or if it's a low-end product.
I think maybe also like we're a little bit too old because everyone, like what we're seeing now, is that almost everyone uses different channels to get information. That's what we call user-driven marketing, right? That we are going as consumers rather than letting a brand push a message to you, and you have the ability to either reject it or buy it. We now have what we call a consumer-driven marketing effort, which means that you as a consumer, you go out and find information about that specific product, service, or whatever, high-end, low-end, it doesn't matter. Because that is what the digital age and the internet has provided to us as consumers. So what we're doing now, what we're seeing is that basically everyone has their selected set of influencers. That it can be CNET, it can be anything in consumer technology, and we're looking at these in order to let them help us make a choice if I'm going to buy that headphones or that headphones. So that's, you know, it's not really industry specific in that sense. There are people that are just flying first class, you know, and they're rating that, and these are influencers that you go to in terms of which one you're gonna buy, which plane are you gonna go for your first class ticket, you know. So they're covering every industry because that's how it works. It's not just in terms of videos, it's also about comments online in terms of how many ratings, how many stars has this product received. We're doing our TripAdvisor, writing comments in TripAdvisor, and like, okay, this has a lot of good reviews in TripAdvisor, so I'm going to select this one. So these things are something, this is what we call a market-driven, a consumer-driven marketing, that we're using these tools to enlighten us to make an easier choice. So it's not really specific in that sense, rather than we're using these tools to make it easier for us to make that purchase.
Sorry, just a very short follow-up.
Yeah.
So just on high-value services, where there's like there's a difference of the micro-influencers being able to maybe afford this. I don't know, if you first-class tickets, for instance, right? If you have 10,000 followers. I don't know what your financial background is, but it could be difficult to make that, especially for services that maybe last a longer duration. First-class tickets, it's maybe 8-hour flight or maybe 4-hour flight, but let's say education that is a longer experience, and I just want to maybe have your thoughts around that, because something that's 4 years.
But again, that's what we push, and that's why I said before. The first thing I said was we're all about perception, and we are about having and working in a sustainable, long-term way. And it doesn't really matter if it's about selling English courses in England, or if it's about selling a free download now. It's about changing that perception in a good way. So when people start to think about going abroad to study English, or buy a new car, or if it's about, I don't know, buying a new aircon at home, we want to be at the top of that mindset. And when we start evaluating that process, we want to have positive associations, so I consider that product. So it's just, again, it's about what you put into that specific tool, I would say again.
I want to ask, in Asia, there are many countries operating in different languages. In Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan, for example, you have 3 Chinese languages. So how do you make sure that your influencers are creating the effective content in the language to the target audience?
I mean, all of our influencers, regardless if they live in Korea, Japan, Singapore, I mean, they're specialists in their own market, in their own circle. They have already been QC'd. I'm not their father, I'm not their educator. They already became stars in their small circles when we start working with them. So nobody can tell them how to do a better content than themselves. What we can do, and what we always do, that we create the creative framework for each specific campaign and give that to the influencer. But he's making that interpretation of that framework and creates his own content about it. But I will not tell him to use I don't know, Hakka in Taiwan, or use classic Mandarin, because he knows exactly how to communicate the best way with his own followers.
Okay, the influencers, how many followers do they have?
Influencers can have everything from 5,000 or 1,000 to 70 million.
What is the average?
Average for influencers?
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. It depends on market to market. We say in China, micro-influence is sort of like around 30, 40,000 would be regarded as a micro-influencers normally in China. If you ask a Swedish guy, probably would be around 7 to 10,000. So that varies. And Indonesia, it's larger. Hong Kong, it's also lower. Korea is lower. Hong Kong is Japan is the absolute lowest, and along with Korea, going around 5,000 for the micro segment. But yeah, you have influences in every single category.
So if I want to buy a service from you, How do you charge them?
Like I said, we sit down on a yearly basis, and we sit with yearly budgets, and we connect what we should do for each quarter to some specific KPIs, and then yeah, we invoice you on a quarterly basis, basically.
So, interesting fact, like what you said about Japan, that they have much lower followers than the average in China. Why is that?
I think Japan was one of the first countries that really started working with blogs, and still today Ameba, which is sort of unheard of here as well, but it's the far most biggest tool to communicate, their social media platform. It's bigger than Instagram and Facebook in Japan, so that's the tool that they use, and it's a very, very old-fashioned blog. And like I said, 1/3 of the blog posts in the world was made only in Japan. So they have a crazy big network in terms of micro-influencers in Japan alone.
So it means that they have gone further down in the niching of each individual.
Yeah, a bigger part of their population would regard it as micro-influencers, correct.
Yes, so I appreciate the idea of the bottom-up approach and giving the influencer kind of allowing them to do their own interpretation of the brands. And I also, I mean, I agree with you on the content is king part, but I mean, looking at Google and SEO especially today, it's also relevant content is king rather than what it used to be, which is more of the black hat method. So, I mean, when you enlist a new client, you know, do you impose certain guidelines towards your influencers in terms of, you know, brand guidelines or policies, or do you allow them full freedom to do whatever, you know?
No, we take very much pride in the creative part. We have two different in-house creative, not agencies, but departments in our company. So this is something that we really take pride in. And again, like I said, it's what you put in this tool that will make the actual results. And since we sit on a long-term basis with the clients, we have to sit down and talk to them. What's happening over the year? Are we launching a product here? What type of campaign should we do here? With what purpose? Connected with what KPIs? So we always give them a creative framework for this. And with this creative framework, we're sending them out a very clear deck. This is sort of like the do's and the don'ts. Yeah. Specifically, the don'ts is important. And then, of course, we frame it with a legal framework. Don't work with, I don't know, if you work with the Apple Watch 1 week, don't go post for, I don't know, Samsung smartwatch or something like this. Yeah. So, if that's your question.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, quick question. Do you have a lot of competitors that's doing the same thing as you are?
There are not that many, to be honest. Not in Asia. I know in Europe and the US, they're popping up like crazy, different kind of influencer marketing companies in different forms. Some people go for the technical solution, that maybe they deliver a platform and sort of give you that tool, and then you sort of have to contact the influencers themselves, and they just take a percentage of the things that the influencers are charging. So I see different business models out there, but I don't see really like the full like type scale agency that we sort of offer our clients. But probably, or 100%, this will also pop up. But since we have been here pretty aggressively since the beginning, like 5 years ago, I think we have a pretty good position. Because again, it's not about, we have 100,000 influencers. It's the data that comes behind those previous collaboration that makes us, interesting. So you don't, as a startup, have to do all of those mistakes yourself, like we have done.
How does the gender kind of equality? Is it more girls that are on these social media platforms or the guys?
Again, it depends on what category. We have a lot of gaming brands, and in that category, it's more men compared to other categories. But if you look at China, I mean, the social media penetration is it is 100%. I think average Chinese person has around 3 to 4 different social media platforms. So it doesn't matter. The penetration is 100%. So what Johan was saying, you will reach 100% any demographic group you will be able to reach through any of these social media platforms. So it only depends on what specific category you're after, and then I will say, okay, here we have mostly women. But in general, if you're asking us in our portfolio, I would say maybe it still leans towards maybe 60-70% women.
I think we're going to take a break there, and we're going to thank Folke very much. I think we need some time also to mingle and maybe speak a little bit longer. We also have Simon here, which is also from, maybe you can stand up so we all see you. He's also from Viral Access, so if you have any further questions, like as we go out and have a glass of wine, they're excellent people to talk to. Folke, on behalf of the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for this fireside talk with us here, and I wish you all a happy Halloween.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh.